Tuesday, March 13, 1962. General Lyman Lemnitzer presented Robert McNamara with a top-secret memo. The memo suggested that President Kennedy authorized the CIA to conduct a terror campaign in Miami and Washington. The purpose? Blame the attacks on Fidel Castro and gain backing from the U.S. and international population to justify a military invasion of Cuba. An American super spy, multiple government agencies working together in secret, and a mounting pressure from the administration led to one of the most nefarious plans in U.S. history that we know of. Edward Lansdale was born in Detroit, Michigan in 1908. The second of four sons, his childhood was nothing out of the ordinary. After high school, he went on to attend UCLA and upon graduation, became an ad executive in Los Angeles and San Francisco. When America joined the fight in World War II, Lansdale signed on with the Office of Strategic Services, the precursor to the CIA.
This picture you're about to see is the first cinematic study of the preparation, arrival, and establishment of permanent cover for secret agents.
As America's first independent intelligence agency, operatives were heavily involved in espionage and supporting resistance movements in Europe. Lansdale spent his time applying what he learned as an ad man, manipulating the local populations with psychological measures. The agency was shut down after only 3 years, and Lansdale accepted a transfer into the Air Force. This was a front. Lansdale was still reporting to the intelligence community and became one of the earliest CIA operatives in the field. In 1950, the Filipino president personally requested Lansdale to assist with the Communist Huk Rebellion. During the Japanese occupation of the Philippines, the Huk created a resistance army consisting largely of peasant farmers against the Japanese forces. The resistance created a stronghold against the Japanese in the villages by utilizing guerrilla warfare. After the liberation of the Philippines, the Philippine government, prompted by the United States of America, disarmed and arrested the Huks for allegedly being communists. To weed them out, the American and Philippine forces actively harassed and imprisoned peasant activists. Civilian casualties were substantial, and the Huks decided to retreat into the mountains and rely on their guerrilla tactics. As an early proponent of psychological warfare, Lansdale got rather creative with his operations against the Huk. One of his more unique plans played on a strong local superstitious belief in vampires. He had his team spread rumors that a vampire was living on a hill where the Huk were based. To further fuel this with evidence, his team captured a rebel Huk, punctured 2 holes in his neck, and hung him to let all the blood drain out. Once this was complete, they placed his bloodless corpse back on the trail to be found by the rebels. Upon discovery, the insurgents immediately fled the region. This, along with other tactics deployed by Lansdale and his team, ultimately ended the Huk Rebellion by 1954, 4 years after he was tasked with the job. If you enjoy reviewing declassified military scandals as much as I do, please consider subscribing to the channel and letting me know in the comments what I can do better. It's also believed that Lansdale was heavily involved in the torture of a former Japanese officer to locate gold stolen by the Japanese Empire and hidden in stashes throughout the Philippines. Allegedly, the gold was recovered, and Lansdale, along with accomplices, opened hundreds of bank accounts all over the world, creating the first Black Op funds. After this, Lansdale spent his time in Saigon, manipulating elections and becoming famous within the intelligence community. Those who knew of his exploits began to call him the T.E. Lawrence of Asia and the American James Bond. As his fame grew, so did his enemies within the intelligence and defense community. He was known as a well-mannered wild card who wasn't concerned with bureaucracy or the egos of those above him. But while his tactics left some feeling uneasy, they yielded results, and President Kennedy felt that he was the right man for a new mission. After the abysmal failure of the Bay of Pigs in 1961, President Kennedy placed Lansdale in charge of a new interagency initiative to overthrow Fidel Castro. The president also made one point very clear. He did not want any plan to include U.S. military intervention. The project was designated Operation Mongoose. In leading Operation Mongoose, Lansdale had to rely on and work with liaison officers that included the State Department, the CIA, the U.S. Information Agency, and the Defense Department. Years later, Lansdale described the situation. "It was the most frustrating damn thing I've ever tackled. I was given full responsibility for a U.S. effort, but had no say on disciplining or giving orders to US personnel working in this effort. Most of these were state and CIA folks who made it plain to me that they hated my guts. So about once a week, I would formally request relief from this duty and be told that this was unacceptable. Robert Kennedy, the president's brother, put intense pressure on the team. During meetings, Robert would often interrupt and is quoted as saying, "Let's get the hell on with it. The president wants some action right now." It seems that the pressure of Cuba was all too much, and Lansdale wanted out. So any plan was going to be the plan. In February of 1962, less than a year after taking the assignment, he told his bosses in DC that he had a plan to overthrow Castro by October of that same year. Lansdale later stated, "I was hopeful, and I put it down as a date without believing it myself that it was a firm date. Tuesday, March 16th, 1962. Operation Northwoods is presented to the president." 3 days after meeting with Robert McNamara, General Lemnitzer was summoned by President Kennedy to the Oval Office to discuss Operation Northwoods. Lansdale was also in attendance. The discussion became heated, and Lansdale is quoted as saying, "We must be ready to intervene with US forces if necessary." Kennedy reacted immediately, questioning if the group was proposing to authorize US military intervention. They lied and assured him, no. Plans in the document included the following: terror campaigns in the United States involving legitimate American victims, staged hijacking of American airliners, destruction of US military vessels in a Remember the Maine incident, starting riots outside of military installations and firing mortars onto US bases. The plan even outlined the murder of Cuban refugees. The terror campaign could be pointed at refugees seeking haven in the United States. We could sink a boatload of Cubans en route to Florida, real or simulated. We could foster attempts on lives of Cuban refugees in the United States, even to the extent of wounding in instances to be widely publicized. In the end, President Kennedy rejected the plan entirely and removed General Lemnitzer from his command, placing him as the supreme Allied commander of NATO in Europe. Curious if Lemnitzer was involved in Operation Gladio, but that's for another video. The US public had to wait 30 years before the documents were declassified due to investigators looking into the assassination of President Kennedy. Many who don't believe the narrative of Kennedy's untimely death point to this instance. They believe that Kennedy was dealing with men more dangerous than he realized, and they wanted him out of their way. Others discuss the possibility that this is just the tip of the iceberg, that the CIA has been running operations in the US, at times harming American citizens for their own agenda. Whether or not they're right, the damage from this document will echo for generations. Let me know your thoughts, and if you'd like to take a deeper dive into the history and missions of the great American James Bond, Edward Lansdale.